Welcome on board. We invite you to a very involving conversation as to certain changes that have occurred with Australian migration law. And to join us in this conversation and elaborate further as to these changes and how exactly you should now react to these changes, we have with us Australian migration law specialist Susantha Katugampola with us. Welcome on board, Mr. Katugampola. It's extremely great to have you with us. Now, since you're here and since a lot of changes have happened since we last spoke to you, let's speak a little bit on it and clarify these changes so that everyone will be well educated as to what changes the Australian migration law sees now.
Thank you, Yani. Basically, the changes that are coming to effect from 1 July 2011 is the changes to the skill migration point test. There was a different point test system, point scheme, pre 1 July 2011. Under that point test, the trade occupations are given high priority and the specialist professional occupations are given high priority, high points.
That's
and also
right.
the minimum requirement of English and the points for English is 6 for each component on the IELTS exam.
All right.
Whereas from 1 July 2011, the new point system changes the points for the skills. If you are a professional, you're getting higher points.
All right.
If you've got a PhD, you're getting more points. And if you've got long work experience, then you're getting more points. And then at the same time, if you want points for your English, then you need to have IELTS 7 in each component in order to obtain the minimum points for English.
So it's very strict now.
Yeah, the minimum requirement, the threshold English requirement is 6 for each component to make a skill migration application. However, certain occupations such as accountants requires IELTS 7 each in academic, and other applicants requires minimum 7 for each component in a general IELTS exam in order to obtain the points in the skill migration system, the point system that is coming to effect from 1 July 2011.
So these changes will be introduced as of the 1st of July this year. So just as Susantha Katugampola was giving details as to the changes, everything will come into effect as of the 1st of July. So it's basically getting things a little bit more strict on the level, the threshold of your English knowledge and other such details, giving more priority to skilled professions. So this only applies to those who are planning to migrate as a skilled migrant. That's right.
And basically, if you lodge your skill migration application, whether it's offshore, that means outside of Australia, or onshore within Australia, after 1st July, then you are affected by these changes. You will have to satisfy this new point test. There's one exemption.
One exemption, okay.
Yes, that is basically for applicants who are in Australia, who were overseas students previously, and made their temporary graduate skill visas pre 8th of February 2010.
All right.
They are able to apply for onshore permanent residency under the all-point test. Under the all-point test, the biggest benefit to the applicant was there's model list, migration occupation demand list.
All right.
On 8th of February 2010, the Australian government abolished that migration occupation demand list. And someone has work experience for 12 months in their skill occupation will be able to obtain points on the model list. And that is a benefit for many overseas students left over in Australia on graduate temporary skill visas.
Great. So that's one exemption to the strict policy that the Australian government is now having on migrants, especially those leaving, say, Sri Lanka to enter Australia. Now, speaking of all these changes, one might wonder a little bit as to whether this is a new scheme that's only introduced against Sri Lanka, or is it something that is more or less done globally?
No, this is a global policy. The Australian government has a non-discriminatory migration policy. Whenever they do changes, whenever they announce changes, those changes will affect every applicant, whether they apply from the UK, Germany, or China, or Sri Lanka, or India. Certainly, the same rules, same laws is applicable. Nevertheless, the government introduces this new state sponsored migration scheme. That means in order to obtain the points, in order to qualify under the current migration skill occupation point test, you are required to have a state sponsorship. And the state sponsorship means that the state and territory governments will have the opportunity to pick and choose people. And in that event, certainly an applicant with experience and the qualifications from the UK or South Africa will have a better opportunity or priority. And it is an underlying truth. And therefore, the Sri Lankan applicants will have to have quality experience,
that's right,
with genuine documents, and also good English skills, good results on IELTS. Then they can have that advantage amongst many other applicants from any other place.
That's right. So even though it is a global policy and they say it's non-discriminatory, it has a little bit of indirect priority that might go towards those of other countries. So make sure you lodge your papers the proper way and that you do things right. So now that's exactly what we're trying to do here, to educate you as to these changes so you can actually go about the right way. Now, speaking of all these details, now lots of Sri Lankan students tend to leave our country and go and educate themselves in Australian universities. Now, you said most of these changes will occur as of 2010 and then the 1st of July. What impact will the changes have on students who are studying overseas?
Yes, many students will have the dream to obtain permanent residency in Australia after completing their studies. Many parents in Sri Lanka or any parts of the world, they are interested in getting their children the permanent residency in Australia. It's a dream of many people, and it's the Australian dream. And I would say that many of the students will have the opportunity, if they were in Australia on 8th of February 2010 on a student visa, and then they've completed a course, degree, diploma or trade qualification, pre-December 2012, they'll have the opportunity to apply for a temporary graduate skill visa. That's called subclass 485.
Right.
On the temporary graduate skill visa, they're given a visa for 18 months. And to process that visa may take minimum of 6 months. Then usually they are given a bridging visa with permission to work. So someone will have the opportunity to work and live in Australia for a 2-year period.
All right.
In that time frame, someone can obtain skilled work experience and then obtain a sponsorship or nomination from an employer in Australia. Then there's an opportunity to apply for employer-sponsored visas. There are 3 types. Subclass 457 is a temporary long-stay visa,
all right,
which will eventually lead to permanent residency. And then 2, if they're highly skilled, they can apply for direct employer nomination scheme, which is direct permanent residency. 3, a direct permanent residency for regional employers. If your employer is located in a regional area, gazetted by the Australian government, then there's RSM, it's Regional Sponsored Migration Scheme. The applicants, the students in Australia, will have the opportunity to apply for their residency under the employer-sponsored nominated scheme. And also, if they satisfy the current point test and the current skill migration requirements, they can apply for migration permanent residency under the current system. Then they need to obtain good points, high points on the IELTS exam, obtain work experience, complete the right course. The biggest change out of all this happened on 1 July 2010.
That's right.
The government changing the skill occupation list. Basically, the skill occupation list for general independent skill migration only limits to 192 occupations.
All right.
Not many occupations are there.
Included.
It's only very limited. It used to be about 400 occupations.
They've really limited it.
Yeah, that's right. That's on the Schedule 3 of the skill occupation list. Then the Schedule 4 for state-sponsored migration scheme that has over 400 occupations. Nevertheless, to qualify under that occupation list, these applicants required to obtain a state sponsorship. That means your occupation got to be on the state-sponsored or state-nominated list.
That particular list.
Although the federal government, the Australian government, has announced or declared many occupations on the main state-sponsored list. The state governments are declaring very limited number of occupations. That's the dilemma, that's the difficulty that a lot of students, a
facing
lot of
right now.
applicants from overseas will have.
Yes, indeed. Now, when you actually listen to these changes, especially to our specialist, Susantha Katugampola, discussing about these changes, everyone must be thinking we definitely need a very good consultant, and I believe this is that individual who will assist you through all these details, and all the things that you need to know will be clarified further by definitely speaking to him. So before we wind up for today, would you like to give a few tips and a little bit of advice to all those who are hoping to migrate, especially in your capacity as a specialist in migrant law?
If you listen to this program before 1 July 2011,
right.
and please lodge your applications with your skill assessment and the English result, IELTS exam under the current point system.
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible. But if you listen to this after 1 July, then you need to obtain proper legal advice, accurate legal advice. It's not just form filling exercise. You need to be absolutely sure how you're going to get the points and how best you can assess your skill occupation to maximize your opportunities. That's the important part. Migration laws in Australia has become a very complex area of law, and obtaining the right legal advice from a lawyer and a registered migration agent is important for your future if you want to obtain the right result, success in Australian migration.
Yes, indeed, and I believe that you would be one such individual who's qualified in this area, yes?
There are many.
There are many,
There
yes.
are many in Australia, and I'm a specialist of immigration, and out of 2,500 or more lawyers practicing in immigration law in Australia, there are only 60 specialists in Australia. So I'm one Sri Lankan, one and only Sri Lankan,
That's right.
proud to be a specialist.
Excellent.
in
We will
immigration
also
law.
lodge other contact details and such so that you can directly get to services and be educated further and to clarify whatever details that might be in your mind right now. So, thanking you, Mr. Katugampola, for joining us. We'll have to wind up for today, and we hope that this was indeed something that did assist you a lot in clarifying all those issues that you had with the changes that Australian migration law has made. So once again, thanking you. We would like to say goodbye to everyone, wishing you a lovely day ahead. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Aiboan.
Aiboan.